Armor is a really fascinating topic. There is so much to say. Well, today we will begin with a very important question. Was the gambeson worn underneath the 13th century knightly armor? Well, let's find out. Hello number ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. So, in the last few days I've been studying a lot of armor, for the last couple of weeks actually to be specific. But a few days ago I was having a very interesting conversation with a friend of mine by the name of Yannick, a very, very knowledgeable lad, I've got to say, regardless of his young age, and for that I commend him. And in fact I asked him a few questions. I asked him what he thought about a few things, particularly pertaining to the knightly armor of the 13th century knights. And the reason why I chose this specific date is because that's the date I have chosen to reenact with my own set of armor that I'm having tailored at the moment. And the reason why I've chosen the 13th century specifically is because if I go all the way into the 14th century, late 14th century, then the armor would cost too much. And then yes, I'm having a GoFundMe campaign at the moment, as you know, Armor Me Up, and I'm receiving donations, but I still have a limited budget. And if I go to the 15th century, then you need a frigging mortgage to get, maybe at the end of my career as a YouTuber, if I get like to 1 million subscribers, and then maybe I could afford one, but at the moment I can't. But on the other hand, luckily the money I have allows me to go all the way to the late 13th century, maybe even early 14th century. And the reason why I say luckily is because, to be honest, 11th century, early 12th century knightly armor, I don't particularly like it. And of course, in both cases, whether we speak about the 13th century or whether we speak about the 11th century, the predominant kind of protection is going to be mail. But an 11th century mail, 12th century mail, 13th century mail, they're all different. And I will make a specific video for this. I've been preparing a specific video where I will make a video where I will talk about the evolution of knightly armor from the 11th century all the way to the 15th. A video specifically made so that you can immediately recognize and date a knight from his armor. Lots of fun, so look forward to that. If I manage, I might even make it tomorrow. If I can't make it tomorrow, maybe in a couple of days, but it will be made within the week. But apart from this, so this is the reason why I talked to him about 13th century knightly armor, and I've also talked with Ian Laspina from Knight Errant's channel, a fantastic channel if you're interested in the armor of medieval European knights, and particularly English knights, but in general about the armor of knights. Then you should check out that channel, link in the description below, because he is really thorough in his videos and in his interpretations. He brings up a lot of interesting topics and a lot of interesting details. And of course, I was also talking about it with Matt Easton from Scholar Gladiatoria. So, you see, we have different ideas and we came up with interesting topics and interesting details, and I thought, why not extending this interesting conversation to my community so that we can also hear your voice in the comments below. So here is the thing. The question is, as I said at the beginning, was the gambeson worn underneath mail in the 13th century? And it's not such an easy question to answer. It's not like, yes, of course it was. Not really, because we don't have iconography to prove it, and we don't have literary proof either as far as Western and Southern Europe is concerned. Now, the reason why I am specifically mentioning Western and Southern Europe is because if we go all the way to Scandinavia, then there is literary proof of gambeson being worn underneath mail in the 13th century specifically. And we find that in the King's Mirror, which explicitly talks about a thin gambeson worn underneath mail. Okay, so we know the Scandinavians did it in the Middle Ages, and so that is one proof that it was done in the 13th century. But of course that's proof for Scandinavia, although I think it's important to keep that in mind, and I will say why in a minute. But as far as actual iconography and evidence, we do see sometimes padding underneath the helmet. Sometimes we do perhaps see something coming out of underneath the mail, but we can't really know if it's a gambeson, if it's padded, or if it's just a tunic or a cot. In fact, this friend of mine and he reenacts, Yannick. He mentions that underneath 13th century mail, you should just wear your, your normal garment, your chemise, your coat, so it's a tunic, and then mail. Now, I sort of counter that, so I politely disagree. My opinion is, it's true that we can't prove it, but that doesn't automatically mean it wasn't done. So as far as the historical reenactment, yes, you are fine if you don't wear gambeson underneath mail, because we can't prove that they did here in Western and Southern Europe. But on the other hand, if you do want to wear gambeson underneath your mail as you are reenacting a 13th century knight of Southern Europe, it's fine as well, because we can't prove either of the theories, okay? There is no proof, and the lack of proof of the usage of gambeson, it doesn't automatically mean that they weren't used. It just means that we don't know for sure. And again, some of the other arguments that I bring up is, so the Scandinavians did it, so someone close to, and we know that the Romans did it. Because as I often mention, because you know that I talk a lot about the Romans did use a sort of gambeson, which we call now in historical reenactment, we call it subarmalis, which is indeed a Latin term. It's just that it's probably not the way they called it. Some people say that the historical name for it was Thoracomachus or something like that, but we don't really know. But it's out of convention. We now all call it subarmalis. So subarmalis is basically the gambeson of the Romans, and we had two different kinds, as I did mention in the video, but I think it's relevant for me to bring this up again. It's either the subarmalis specifically made for segmentata, which had padded shoulders only, or the subarmalis made for mail, so hamata, which was padded all the way through. And this is interesting because it shows us that the Romans did it. So if the Romans did it, it means that it was important to do it. And the idea of saying, yes, but the Romans, we're talking about legionaries, so foot soldiers, and the knights, they were on horseback. No, that doesn't work either, because as an explanation for the knights not having to use the padding, because yes, the padding is important for your comfort as you wear mail, but also it provides blunt resistance, it provides shock absorption. It's very important, because without padding underneath, mail is sort of a half armor, if you will. Meaning that it helps you against cuts, it helps you against penetration, but if someone smashes you with a war hammer or a mace or anything, even murder stroke with a sword, mail is not going to offer protection. You could still get severely injured. In fact, imagine this. Imagine like you are a knight and you are going full gallop, you are charging with your lance, but so is your opponent, and you get hit by your opponent's lance. Yes, hopefully your mail and the mesh of your mails and the rivets, will prevent the lance from penetrating, hopefully. But you're still going to get the full shock of the impact. And if you don't have at least a little bit of padding underneath, you will end up with broken ribs, which will mean that you will be out of combat. And some of these might be really, really dangerous. Maybe you could even have some ribs, puncturing your lungs. It could be really nasty. So I think that some form of padding was important, regardless of the fact that you were on horseback. And again, the Romans did it on horseback as well, because auxilia were on horseback. What armor did they wear? Mail, hamata, and they did wear subarmalis as far as we know. So the Romans did it, people in Scandinavia do it, but then Southern Europeans forget about it. Why? Here is I don't think it makes sense. So to me, I think it makes more sense to think that subarmalis, a gambeson was worn, rather than think that it wasn't. Although, again, still acceptable the idea of them not wearing, because we don't have proof. But what sort of gambeson? What's important to say is that often in these modern combat sports, which represent medieval fighting, we do find very thick gambesons worn underneath mail. That is not historically accurate. So that is something we can automatically say, no, at least for historical reenactment. Because when we see iconography, when we look at iconography, whether it be statues, whether it be paintings, whether it be anything really, and we see that mail is closely fit to the body, almost slim fit, to be honest. So what that means is that you don't have, you never really see these puffy chests, these puffy people, with all this thick padding underneath. So a thick gambeson, it's not that it didn't exist, it existed, but as a standalone armor. But if you were going to wear a gambeson underneath mail, it would have been thinner layer of protection for both your comfort and for some blunt absorption or blunt impact force absorption. So to wrap it up, my opinion is, my proposal, my idea as far as this situation is concerned is, true, we don't have sources to back this up, but I think I think the people in Europe, it would be more probable for them, and maybe we will find historical proof for this, for them to wear a thin gambeson on top of their cot, underneath, so tunic underneath their mail. I think it just makes more sense. I can't prove it, but you can't prove me wrong either with your counter things. So at the end of the day, I think we should be open for both possibilities within historical reenactment, that if someone wears a gambeson, it's still historically accurate underneath mail, and if someone doesn't, that's also historically accurate and it's acceptable. Okay, noble ones, well, I hope that you enjoyed this discussion. I would like to hear your thoughts on this matter, whether you think a gambeson should be worn with a 13th century mail armor or not, down below. I will see you tomorrow for my next daily upload. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.